Dale Christopher Cregan, born on June 6, 1983, in Tameside General Hospital, Greater Manchester, would grow up to become one of the UK's most notorious and cold-blooded killers, ultimately serving a whole life sentence for 4 murders, including the calculated executions of 2 unarmed police officers. Raised in a modest 2-up 2-down terraced home in Droylsden, Cregan came from an ordinary background. He had an older brother, a younger sister, and would later father a child of his own. Despite this seemingly unremarkable upbringing, Cregan quickly descended into criminality. After leaving Littlemoes High School, he drifted into drug dealing, starting with cannabis before moving into the far more lucrative cocaine trade in his early 20s. He flaunted his earnings through luxury holidays to Thailand, Antigua, Amsterdam, and France, as well as expensive cars, designer clothes, and a lifestyle many in his community envied, though officially listing his profession as a plasterer. He was making tens of thousands of pounds weekly from drugs. A prominent figure in Manchester's gangland, Cregan was known for his violent tendencies, paranoia, and erratic behavior. He reportedly lost his left eye in a violent altercation in Thailand, although Greater Manchester police believe it was intentionally gouged out by rival criminals, perhaps as punishment, perhaps as intimidation. This gruesome disfigurement, covered with a black onyx prosthetic eye, would later become his chilling trademark. Despite his public bravado, Cregan was deeply involved in an ongoing feud between 2 families, the Shorts and the Atkinsons. Tensions dated back more than a decade and included violent clashes, kneecappings, and attempted assassinations. David Short, the eventual victim of Cregan's second murder, believed Cregan had been responsible for a previous attempt on his life. The bloodshed began in earnest on May 25, 2012, when Cregan and 2 associates arrived at the Cotton Tree pub in Droylsden. Wearing a balaclava, Cregan entered the pub and opened fire, killing 23-year-old Mark Short and injuring 3 others. Mark's father, David Short, emerged from the toilets only to cradle his dying son in his arms, though Cregan was arrested shortly. Afterward, he was released on bail, something that would prove to be a fatal miscalculation by authorities. Fearing retaliation, and reportedly enraged by threats David Short made against his family, including graphic threats to kidnap and kill his young son, Cregan planned a second, even more brutal attack. On August 10th, he ambushed David Short outside his Clayton home as the older man was unloading his car, after chasing him into the house and shooting him multiple times at close range. Cregan threw a military-grade M75 grenade onto the dying man's body, a weapon previously unseen in mainland UK killings. 10 minutes later, another grenade was hurled at a nearby house on Luke Road, though no injuries occurred. By this point, Cregan had become the most wanted man in the country, and the police launched a nationwide manhunt. He and accomplice Anthony Wilkinson went on the run, but not before Cregan committed an act that would horrify the nation and change the face of British policing. On September 18, 2012, Cregan placed a hoax 999 emergency call to lure officers to a house in Abbey Gardens, Hattersley. He calmly told the operator, "I'll be waiting," before hanging up. Constables Nicola Hughes, 23, and Fiona Bone, 32, responded to the call. As they walked up the front garden path, Cregan opened the door and immediately fired 32 rounds in just 31 seconds from a Glock pistol. PC Hughes was hit 8 times, including 3 shots to the head. PC Bone was also struck multiple times, up to 8 bullets before she could draw her taser and fire. As the officers lay dying, Cregan threw another grenade at them, leaving a scene of utter devastation. He then drove to a police station and calmly surrendered, telling officers, "I dropped the gun at the scene. I've murdered 2 police officers. You were hounding my family, so I took it out on yous." His gruesome admission stunned investigators. The response to these murders was swift and overwhelming. Cregan's trial, which began on February 4, 2013, was held at Preston Crown Court under unprecedented security. Snipers were stationed on rooftops, scaffolding was erected for armed surveillance, and every day, a massive police convoy transported Cregan between HMP Manchester and court. Each convoy included 2 prison vans, multiple police vehicles, motorcycle outriders, and even a helicopter. In total, 120 officers were deployed daily, with the security operation costing over £5 million. As a Category A prisoner, Cregan was subjected to rigorous security checks, including strip searches and inspections of his prosthetic eye socket to prevent contraband smuggling, procedures that purportedly infuriated him. During the 4-month trial, Cregan admitted to the 4 murders and 3 attempted murders, including causing explosions with grenades. He showed little emotion throughout, even smiling and shaking hands with fellow defendants after the verdicts were returned. Of the 9 others on trial for their involvement, 4 were acquitted. On June 13, 2013, Mr. Justice Holroyd sentenced Cregan to a whole life order, meaning he would never be released. In his sentencing remarks, the judge stated that Cregan had acted with premeditated savagery, and that he had deliberately lured the 2 police officers to their deaths. He emphasized that Cregan had known they were unarmed and had murdered them in cold blood. The grenade attack was unprecedented in UK history and marked a grim new chapter in gang violence. Public officials did not hold back in their condemnation. Sir Peter Fahey, Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, described Cregan and his associates as a scourge on society. Greater Manchester's Police and Crime Commissioner, Tony Lloyd, referred to them as animals. Ian Hansen, head of the Greater Manchester Police Federation, called Cregan an abomination upon our society, stating he had no problem imagining Cregan staring through his single eye at a locked prison cell for the rest of his life. Home Secretary Theresa May added, "Dale Cregan is a despicable individual, and I am pleased he has been sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars." The families of the victims also expressed their grief and anger. Bryn Hughes, father of Nicola Hughes, said, "She was brutally and callously murdered in the most despicable and cowardly way. Our lives have been shattered beyond belief." Paul Bone, Fiona's father, spoke of his continued struggle, noting how every Tuesday at lunchtime, the time of her murder was a painful reminder. Beyond the headlines, Cregan's psychological profile drew attention. Consultant psychiatrist Dr. James Collins revealed that Cregan had admitted he could not stop thinking about David Short's threats, and that killing him brought relief. Consultant criminal psychologist Ellie Godsey later assessed that Cregan showed classic signs of psychopathy, grandiosity, lack of empathy, and a distorted sense of self-worth. His violent behavior, combined with his craving for control and fear-based influence over his community, painted a picture of a man deeply entrenched in a criminal culture where intimidation was currency. A local resident, referred to as Mr. A, described how Cregan ran things in Tameside, often making people feel uneasy just by his presence. The feud that led to the Shorts' deaths dated back to a minor dispute in 2001 when Leon Atkinson, a friend of Cregan's, allegedly assaulted David Short over a look. The conflict escalated over the years with family members clashing, and by 2012, it reignited after a bar fight involving Atkinson's mother. 12 days later, Mark Short was gunned down. Cregan's grenade attacks became his sinister calling card, and despite his criminal notoriety, many in his neighborhood admired his apparent wealth and power. Some young people saw his flashy lifestyle, expensive holidays, Mercedes cars, designer clothes as aspirational. Mr. A explained how this made ordinary citizens feel powerless and cynical. "It's hard," he said, "when someone pulls up in a 4x4 with a suntan and wads of cash, and you're just trying to get your kid to nursery." But beneath the bravado was a man who lived in fear of retribution, fear of losing control, fear of the very same cycle of violence he perpetuated. On the night before he killed the police officers, He was reportedly drinking beer, smoking cigars, taking cocaine, and browsing news stories about himself. He even had his captive give him a haircut, took a bath, and dressed in fresh clothes, perhaps in preparation for the legacy he hoped to leave. Yet the legacy Cregan leaves behind is not one of power or infamy, but of devastation. His actions stole the lives of 4 people, destroyed countless others, and scarred a community. The cost of his rampage wasn't only measured in money or man-hours, but in heartbreak, loss, and a lasting sense of vulnerability among both law enforcement and civilians. Dale Cregan will die behind bars, locked away from the society he once terrorized. But the story of his crimes serves as a chilling reminder of how unchecked violence, revenge, and ego can lead even the most mundane beginnings to an unimaginably dark end.